Wow, what a game we just had. Auburn, Georgia has come to an end 31-10 as some of these other games are coming to an end as well. We're going to talk all about it. You know, this is our recruit reaction. So we are going to break down these games, but from a recruiting angle. So it's really cool. I got On Three's Steve Wiltfong, the most plugged in insider in all of the land. He's going to join me here in just a second. But before we get going, guys, make sure you hit subscribe to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. We're going to be here live for about the next 30 to 40 minutes, talking Georgia, talking Ohio State, Texas A&M, Oregon. They played on a Friday night. They had a bunch of visitors on campus. We're also going to get into some of the visitor lists at FSU. There's a big one at UF this weekend as well in Gainesville. So let's get to it. All right, let's bring in the great Steve Wiltfong. And Steve, wow, Georgia bounces back. You know, you could really tell that that game took a lot out of these guys, not just Georgia, but Alabama as well, who is in a dogfight right now with Vandy. Have it on the screen right now as we speak. But man, Georgia beats Auburn. We're going to talk about it from a recruiting perspective. Steve, a lot of big names on campus.
Yeah, I was going to say you forgot to mention Vandy. They were watching this Vanderbilt-Alabama game on the Jumbotron.
Really?
In between the hedges, cheering for Vanderbilt, and Kirby Smart having to direct the attention back towards the field in that ball game. A lot of recruits had their eyes on the field at Georgia today. 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry and 5-star offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell in the 2026 class. Two of the headliners on campus, Josh. I think that Georgia leads for both of them. I would be stunned if Georgia did not ultimately land Justice Terry. And right. Jackson Cantwell, I've just felt like the pulse of his recruitment has favored Georgia for quite some time. He's still going through his process. He's been to Nebraska this year. He's been to Missouri this year. He's got future visits with LSU on the docket in Alabama. But I think Georgia setting the tone for Jackson Cantwell. Jared Curtis was there, arguably the top quarterback in the country in 2026. He's already committed to Georgia. So they have their franchise quarterback in 2026. Can they get this franchise left tackle? I like where they stand. Several flip targets on campus. Reported earlier in the week that I thought CJ Wiley would be there, 4-star receiver committed to Florida State. He was indeed there. And Chad Simmons, our colleague, reporting that Laganza Hayward, 4-star safety, top 100 recruit committed to Tennessee, was also on campus. So, we'll see what Shady Hayward had to say about it, but I think that Georgia's way in it for CJ Wiley right now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you specifically about those two names, Laganza Shady Hayward and CJ Wiley, because both of them at the time of their decisions, we thought UGA had a really good shot. Now, not to say that Georgia was the front runner in those recruitments heading into decision day, but the Dogs seem like they haven't given up. CJ Wiley shows up while FSU is playing Clemson at home in prime time. So CJ Wiley makes the conscious decision, hey, I'm going to be in Athens instead of Tallahassee where I'm committed. But CJ Wiley has, to his credit, been in Tallahassee already this season for games. So when it comes to CJ Wiley, I mean, does it look like this could just be a matter of time before he ends up on another commit list?
Well, I don't want to say that because I do think he has a lot of love for Florida State. He's been to 2 games in Tallahassee this fall. No doubt he'll be paying close attention to Florida State's big game tonight against Clemson. Huge recruiting weekend in Tallahassee. They would have loved to have CJ Wiley back down there, but he was at Georgia. Georgia's a real threat in this recruitment. They're the biggest threat, in my opinion, to Florida State right now. You have Auburn, LSU, and some other programs trying to chip away. Colorado has reached out, but I like Georgia as the biggest challenger. They got him back on campus. Looking forward to hearing how that went. But talked to his dad earlier in the week, and he said that Kirby Smart, James Coley remain in regular contact. They've been to Georgia games before. They know what that program's about. He said, look, he's still committed to Florida State, but they want to see what continues to happen in Tallahassee. They're going to continue to go through the process. He said, look, there's a reason why Florida State's recruiting him to get back on track. But at the same time, there's some other programs recruiting him to maintain being the standard, the top college football. And Georgia was one of his finalists the first time around. And him getting back there again today was not just to see a good game.
Yeah, no doubt. The other prospect I wanted to talk to you about was Laganza Shady Hayward. Now, this recruitment had kind of gone back and forth a little bit prior to Hayward's commitment, but it started trending to Tennessee. However, even though he committed to Tennessee, the Dogs have not let up. What do you make of this recruitment, and what do you make of Hayward showing up at Athens this weekend?
Well, I think when he took his official visit to Georgia, it was the first weekend in June. There was a lot of Tennessee smoke coming into the official visits. And for a minute there, it looked like Georgia turned that momentum. Family bought a lot of merchandise in that Georgia bookstore that weekend, and it seemed like he was going to be a Bulldog. Maybe they'll eventually wear it. I don't know if they turned it into Goodwill or sent it to a third world country or whatever, but Georgia gets him on campus. Still figuring out what that means. That was Chad Simmons' report. We'll have more on that later, but Georgia was a program that made it real interesting in the sweepstakes, and we'll see if they can't, make a move after getting them back on campus this weekend.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to Georgia, another thing that I noticed is, and talking to Rusty Mansell earlier this week, the defensive line, they're still got a couple needs to fill on the defensive line. In this weekend, we saw a couple flip targets on campus. Joseph Mbachu committed to UF. You got Braxton Kyle, who's a Rutgers commitment from the state of Georgia. And then you got defensive lineman Jeremiah McLeod, who's also committed to the Florida Gators. Are we going to see, and like you said, we got Justice Terry hanging out there and Elijah Griffin, but Rusty said he could sign as many as 5 defensive linemen in this class, interior type guys. So when it comes to Mbachu, McLeod, and Kyle, who do you think Georgia is prioritizing right now?
Well, I think they're still watching senior film and evaluating. And this weekend is a big opportunity. This weekend is as big as any weekend as far as that goes, because Kirby Smart, Trey Scott, Glenn Schumann and company want to converse with these guys, get to know them better as people, see how they tick, see how they are around each other, see how they fit in with the players in the locker room. Those intangibles are going to be just as big as the tangibles that they're seeing on their senior film. So I think the guys that just have the personality that they're looking for, as they continue to have dialogue with them, could separate one from the other here at the end.
All right. So as we talk, Steve, Vandy just went in and scored a touchdown. So it's 39-28 point after pending. But we got a burner here in Nashville, baby. I think I might need to get out of my seat and head to the West End and catch the last 5 minutes of this game over by Vanderbilt. All right. I want to talk a little bit more Georgia. The Dogs, they were actually able to beat Auburn twice on Saturday. Georgia landed number 5 running back Usman Kroma about an hour before kickoff. The 4-star running back, it was a couple teams were involved, but it really came down to 2. And it was Auburn and Georgia. FSU, Tennessee also on the list, but more of a hat on the table for decision day. What do you make of Usman Kroma committing to Georgia over Auburn on game day?
Well, obviously it was only a matter of time, right? That's where he ultimately wanted to go, because Georgia was not the program that recruited him the hardest at any point in his process. But when they green lighted it, they landed him. Auburn, Florida State, those are probably the programs that invested the most time into recruiting Usman Kroma. But look, Georgia, it speaks for itself. Their track record of running back offense, playing on the biggest stage, NFL draft year in and year out, playing with a lot of people he knows in the locker room, representing the Bulldogs in the home state school. Coach Crawford did a good job recruiting them. And as Kirby Smart and company went along with this process, Kroma was a guy they had to have. They got him on campus a couple weeks ago. Then he visited Auburn and Florida State again after that, announced his commitment to Georgia today. But I think he kept Auburn warm all the way up until his decision here. Yeah. So I think he had a lot of love for Auburn, but it's just Georgia and the opportunity to play between the hedges for the program that he, probably grew up watching the most. And now he gets a chance to go into Georgia and write his own story and see where it takes him.
All right, Dog fans, talk to us. Let us know how we feel.
Class, Josh.
What's that?
They're going to have the number 1 class.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to ask Georgia fans. Let us know. Number 1 class incoming. How are you guys feeling right now? Usman Kroma, but, the big dogs are still hanging out there. Justice Terry, Elijah Griffin, and whatever else Georgia's going to do down the stretch. We're going to find out as they beat Auburn today, 31-10. Let us know how you guys are feeling. Georgia fans, put the lights out on Auburn. Let us know. Comment section below. Lights out on Auburn. Lights out. All right, let's talk Ohio State. They played Iowa. They won. It was a breeze in Columbus. QB commit Tavian St. Clair, the 5-star plus prospect. He hasn't missed a game this season. So, of course, Tavian St. Clair was in the building, and talking to those Ohio State insiders, Tavian St. Clair might not miss a game all season. What a great representative to have on campus. Other big names on campus this weekend. As you can see, there's other teams coming after some of these guys, Steve, like a Riley Pettijohn, a TJ Alford, a Zion Grady. How important was it for Ohio State to have some of these guys on for an easy win in Big Ten conference play?
Dominant on both sides of the ball against a very hard-nosed Iowa team. Ohio State has the #1 recruiting class in the country. And anytime you can get these guys back around each other to continue to build that bond, to continue to allow them to talk about their future together, making an impact inside the shoe, is inches in the recruitment. You never know how they're going to add up. Obviously, Tavian St. Clair's locked in out of Bellefontaine, Ohio. He's the jewel of a class. But Devin Sanchez back on campus. He's been rock solid to Ohio State. Riley Pettijohn was one of the biggest recruiting wins of the cycle, pulling him out of the Lone Star State over Texas, Texas A&M, USC, among others. Quincy Porter, they beat their rival Michigan for him. Tarvos TJ Alford out of the Sunshine State. Barrow Beach, he's taken some visits this fall to Florida State and Miami, but I think he's still good with his commitment to Ohio State. Zion Grady, he had love at times for Auburn and Florida State during his process, but the visits to Ohio State always blow him away. He's committed. They get him back on campus this weekend. Same with Nate Roberts, tight end commit that Oregon's been trying to chip away at. So I don't think Ohio State has anything to worry about with the guys that returned to campus this weekend and visited.
Yeah, a pretty standard big visit weekend for Ohio State, getting in a lot of the commitments, and they'll gear this thing up to get the big uncommitted targets and the flip targets on campus as the season goes on. Next weekend, Ohio State will be involved in a big visit weekend. It's just not their own. It's going to be in Eugene, Steve. As we were about to jump on, they announced that game is going to be in prime time. So I'm thinking, with you here in Nashville next weekend, I think maybe we go live for that Ohio State-Oregon recruit reaction show.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. It's going to be star-studded, 5 stars everywhere, heading out to Eugene, and Naeem Alford will be there. He's an Ohio State commit, been committed to the Buckeyes since February. Auburn and Oregon are trying to change that. And then you have Jaime Stewart, Josh, 5-star defensive lineman, announced his reclassification today from 2026 to 2025, a long time coming, has set 4 official visits. His first one's going to be to Oregon next weekend to see 2 of his top 4 schools, Oregon and Ohio State. The Buckeyes are going to get 2 chances to impress as he visits Ohio State for the Michigan game. He loves getting on campus around Larry Johnson and that coaching staff, loves the way they develop high-profile defensive linemen in the past, and loves the way that they've recruited, thinks it's a championship program for years to come. But they got their hands full. LSU getting a visit for the Alabama game, and then USC getting a visit for the Nebraska game. There's been times where USC has looked like they've had the momentum, and there's always a ton of confidence around LSU that they'll ultimately close the prize in-state recruit.
Yeah. So we're talking about Jaime Stewart. Really interesting story here. He reclassifies from 26 to the 2025 class. Jaime Stewart in the 2026 class was the #1 prospect overall. He was the #1 defensive lineman in America, and he's from the state of Louisiana. That much we knew. We weren't sure. There was rumors even back to the spring that Jaime Stewart was going to reclassify. We talked about it all summer. It didn't happen. We got into the fall, and we start to hear those rumors intensify, and today he does it. So now I said what he was for the 26 class. Let's talk about what he is for the 2025 class. He is the number 14 ranked player overall, the number 3 defensive lineman in America in the 2025 class. So with that being said, you broke some big news on where he's going to take official visits. But looking at his recruiting prediction machine, we got LSU trending at about 91% right now. That's what it was, at least heading into this game. Is LSU going to be the team to beat over the next 2.5 months?
I think most people feel that way, that Jaime Stewart, that LSU will be tough to beat. But when you talk to his camp, you talk to him, you get the sense that USC has led at times and Ohio State has led at times as well. And so LSU, they're going to have their hands full with the Trojans and the Buckeyes, and then the Ducks. You never sleep on Oregon when it's closing time. He's taking his official visit to Oregon next weekend. That's going to be his first official visit of the process. He has called Dan Lanning a defensive mastermind. Then he is going to go to LSU for the LSU Alabama game. That will be his second LSU game of the fall after taking one in last month. He's really connected with defensive line coach Bo Davis. Frank Wilson's been leading the charge on his recruitment. His ties in state are second to none. He loves the advice he gets from Frank Wilson outside of football. He says he's not opposed to going to a school out of state, but obviously he knows a lot of people in that LSU locker room. He's been to campers numerous times. He's camped. He feels very comfortable at LSU. But he's going to go from LSU. I believe his next visit will be USC for the Nebraska game. Coach Eric Henderson, USC's defensive line coach, who coached Aaron Donald, among others, in the NFL, won a Super Bowl. He's from New Orleans. He's part of this USC staff that is turning things around defensively, turning a culture around. And Lincoln Riley told Jaime Stewart well before the season that he was going to get the defense right, that he was going to get the right coaches into that program to get them rolling on the defensive side of the ball. He has told Jaime Stewart no lies. He was blown away by USC's season opening performance victory over LSU. I think that was a needle mover in his recruitment. He's been to the Trojans campus numerous times, knows that coaching staff well. Coach Henne, I'm not sure there's a coach doing a better job recruiting him right now. Some would say Frank Wilson, but he is really connected with Coach Henne, who would be his position coach if he picked USC. So he likes what they're doing in their trajectory. And then Ohio State gets the last official visit for the Michigan game. He's been there a couple times. It always blows him away. Coach Larry Johnson, Coach Alan Clark. He called Larry Johnson the best defensive line coach in college football history. Again, he loves the way they're recruiting across the board, thinks it's a championship caliber program for years to come. He is going to sign early during the December 4th early signing period, Josh, and he's going to enroll early. So it's going to go fast now with him announcing his reclassification.
Great intel there, Steve. That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you what you thought his timetable was, because if it is the early signing day, we're talking 11, 12 weeks away. I mean, 11 or 12 weekends away from him making his decision, which isn't a lot of time to take visits. You said you broke some big news today with his official visit schedule, but Steve, just wondering, is there any other team? Because everybody needs an elite defensive lineman, and a 5-star just hit the market for the 2025 class. Do you see any other team getting in this recruitment, or is it pretty sealed off right now to the programs you mentioned?
Well, you never know if a Miami or a Texas can sneak back in there. Those were two programs that have been prominent at times for Jaime Stewart, but it's been clear for a while this is his top 4.
Right. All right. Bama just scored, so we are still keeping an eye on this one. It's getting really, really interesting here. Bama needs to pull this out to beat Vandy, as crazy as that sounds. We'll keep an eye on that. All right. So Ohio State. Steve, they have the number 1 class in America, but just in the segment before, you said you thought Georgia is going to be the team to finish number 1 in America. But what is it with Ohio State? Is there just not enough firepower left on the board for them to continue to maintain number 1? Or are you expecting them to lose some prospects here?
No, there certainly is. I just think that with what Georgia still has out there, with how many more high school players they're going to take, they are the betting favorite to ultimately finish number 1. That would take nothing away from this outstanding class that Ohio State has, from the 5-star quarterback to a nice group, a nice pair of running backs. They'd like to land another on the offensive line. I think that when you start looking at guys that they could be recruiting on the offensive line, a name that comes to mind for me for Arkansas is Connor Howes. He's an offensive tackle from Florida, committed to Arkansas. I think Ohio State is a program that you could maybe see get involved there. So I think they'd like to add another offensive lineman to this class, maybe another defensive back perhaps Anthony Turbo Rogers, who's committed to Alabama, if they like to go to a third running back because they're going to lose their top two, the top duo in college football, perhaps at the end of the season. So running back, DB, offensive line, probably the places where they would like to add another as they wrap up this cycle. And then obviously defensive line with guys like Jaime Stewart and Malik Autry. If they land Jaime Stewart, they stay number one.
Yeah, absolutely. That would help keep them number one. So Ohio State fans, a very convincing win over Iowa today. Got to feel good about that as you head to Eugene. So talk to us, comment section below. How are we feeling about recruiting and how are we feeling about today's big win? Let us know. All right, Steve, let's head out to Lincoln, Nebraska. Over 40 recruits on campus for the Rutger game. It's almost over. 14-7 with about a minute 30 to go in this one. Nebraska trying to put the final touches on it. And a nice group of commits. Like I said, over 40 in total from the 25, 26, 27 classes. Headlined by a bunch of top commitments. Connor Booth, Jackson Carpenter, Christian Jones. They are the big names on campus, along with 2026 defensive lineman Bryce Perry Wright. He's a top 10 defensive lineman in the 26 class, top 100 overall, and he made the trip from Buford, Georgia. Steve, what are you hearing on recruits reacting to this game?
Well, look, Josh, and I'm looking it up because I misspoke about Tennessee earlier in the season and got reamed in the comment section. And yep, didn't need to look this one up. It's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons since the Huskers have been bowl eligible. And even within that, they still typically recruit top 25 recruiting classes. But there is a lot of momentum and excitement around this program right now. To beat undefeated Rutgers would be huge for the Huskers. Getting them to, that would be 5-1, right? So one game away from postseason play for the first time in 7 years. This is one of the most passionate, dedicated fan bases in the country. They travel as well. They travel like the Steelers and the Raiders on the road. For them to get bowl eligible, that would be fantastic. They are trying to get the spatula out on some big time guys here down the stretch. They were hoping to get 4-star receiver Corey Sims there today. His people told me that he was no longer coming, USC commit, but they'll keep trying to chip away for him. Dawson Merritt committed to Alabama, uphill recruitment, but the dialogue remains. They continue to talk to Dawson Merritt. They continue to talk to his family. I think that Nebraska is going to keep trying to chip away there. They need to play well to even get into that one, right? Michael Terry's a 5-star athlete there. Final was 4. That one's trending towards Texas right now. But sometimes these long games, you never know how it's going to shake out. Oregon's battling for Michael Terry too. But Nebraska, they're stockpiling wins. They got a young quarterback that everyone's excited about that recruits as well as anybody in any locker room. So they got to finish this game out against Rutgers, get them one step closer to a winning season, which we haven't seen in 7 years. And if they get there, maybe you get a big win at the end of the cycle from a guy like Dawson Merritt, a Cortez Mills, in-state tight end Chase Lofton. Those are the names that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, Chase Lofton, the number 2 player in the state, committed to FSU. He could be one that Nebraska flips late. So before we get out of here, Steve, on the Nebraska segment, next week, 2 teams that are very close to your heart, Nebraska and Indiana. Whew, I don't know. I'm not going to ask you now who you're going with. I know that's going to be a tough one for you to pick, but
I'm going to pick Indiana. I think the Hoosiers, they're 6-0, and they're very tough to stop on offense. So Nebraska is going to have to find a way to generate more offense if they're going to beat Indiana. I love the way they're playing. I saw Indiana commit Davian Chandler play last night. He's a 4-star receiver from Indianapolis. They played against Indianapolis Warren Central, where Damian Shanklin, LSU commit, and several other. There were probably about 12 legit Division I prospects on the field in the senior class alone. Both teams were undefeated. Davian Chandler was fantastic. Best player on the field last night going to Indiana. They beat Northwestern tonight. Did you watch any of the Indiana Northwestern game, Josh?
No, I haven't. I've been keeping an eye on the Rutgers-Nebraska game.
Yeah, the Northwestern Stadium is small but intimate, and it's right there on Lake Michigan. It is unbelievable. Their facilities are second to none. But Indiana, fighting Kurt Signetti's. Have you seen the Kurt Signetti memes? You got Sig with a cigarette popping out. I mean, there's so much excitement. I live in the Indianapolis area. There's so much excitement around the Hoosiers right now. Rightfully so. They're 6-0.
Yeah.
I got them beating Nebraska next weekend, but the Huskers are tough. And they're playing at a high level, and they continue to get – that's a big opportunity to beat another ranked team on the road. And you do that, you continue to get merit points with a guy like Dawson Merritt.
No question. I mean, you can even just tell Nebraska recruiting is buzzing a little bit more than it was last year at this time. And if Nebraska can keep winning, watch out. All right, let's talk Oregon. And this was a Friday night fight, 31-10. The Ducks pulled out over Michigan State. Ducks moved to 5-0. And as we said, they take on Ohio State next weekend. Steve, this was the rare occasion that a Friday night game brings out big time visitors. I mean, look at this list. Decorey Moore, the number 1 wide receiver in America, the number 2 edge in the 26 class, Zion Ely, he was there. Thomas Davis Jr., Aiden Harris, Jaree Harris. It was loaded. I'm telling you, how were the Ducks able to pull this off? Because basically, Steve, when a team has a Friday night game, they kind of punt on the big visit weekend. What happened here?
Well, first of all, Decorey Moore, talked to him today. His intentions were to be there, but he was not able to be on campus because they have their rival game on Friday and they had practice. He is trying to get out there for the Ohio State game next Saturday. I assume a lot of that will depend on how they play on Friday against DeSoto. There'll be a lot of eyes on that DeSoto Duncanville ball game this coming weekend.
Yeah.
But Zion Ely is the number 1 edge rusher in the country per on-3. Aiden Harris is the number 1 defensive lineman per the on-3 industry, and both can see themselves at Oregon. The Ducks are pursuing a second straight top 5 recruiting class this cycle. They'll be in that conversation again next year with some of the names that they're already impressing early. Zion Ely, he was at Saturday Night Live at the end of July. Says that Oregon's showing a lot of interest in him. He thinks they keep it real. He can see himself in that defense. And Aiden Harris, they see him as an edge rusher also, and he loves that. So he was there with his twin brother, Andrew Harris. Ohio State has been considered the favorite for him, but Oregon gave him a lot to think about. Thomas Davis Jr., their 4-star teammate, Notre Dame's one of his favorites, but Oregon certainly in the middle of that one. And then Zion Ely's teammate, safety Jaira Edwards, number 5 safety in the land per the on-3 industry rankings. He was at Saturday Night Live. He says big things continue to come at Oregon. So they got a chance to land all those 2026s that were there this weekend for the win over Michigan State. But now they got through that ball game. Bring on Ohio State. And Vanderbilt is racking up first downs themselves.
Yeah, Vanderbilt trying to put this one away. So let's talk about next weekend with Ohio State coming to town. What type of weekend are we expecting? I mean, it sets up perfectly. If the Ducks were able to pull this off on a Friday night, imagine what they're going to have in Eugene on a Saturday night with Ohio State, and College Game Day also announced that they will be in Eugene for this one.
Yeah, it's going to be an insane atmosphere. Autzen Stadium, it doesn't seat the most people in college football, but they're compacted in there, and it is as loud a venue as you can find in college football. It's going to be loaded with blue chippers in 2025, 2026, and 2027. And one of the strengths of Oregon's staff is from Dan Lanning to the strong off-field recruiting department. They build genuine, meaningful relationships with these top recruits. So when these guys get on campus, there's going to be a foundational relationship already with them. We know this program has a ton of infrastructure and resources that also helps them in the recruiting process, but nothing helps more than what would be a win over Ohio State. And Dan Lanning and Oregon, they've been close to winning these kind of ball games. 3 tough ones really against Kalen DeBoer in Washington over the last 2 seasons. They've played in some of these big games. They're ready to bust through. This is a huge opportunity against Ohio State. And when you start positioning yourself for the college football playoff and beyond, these are the kind of games that help you get the seed you want, to get the home game to get a more favorable ball game, because we expect both Ohio State and Oregon to be in the college football playoff. Who's going to have a more favorable matchup when they play their first game in the college football playoff? This game's going to have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. All right, Oregon fans, talk to us. Comment section below. You got by Michigan State, but how are we feeling about Ohio State coming to town next weekend in prime time? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, Steve, let's head to South Carolina. They played Ole Miss this weekend, and it was a big visit weekend. But even before the game got started, South Carolina started picking up some commitments. What was going on in Columbia this weekend? They added Malik Clark, who recently decommitted from FSU. They had wide receiver Jordan Gidron, who recently reclassified up to the 2025 class. And then today they also land tight end Jamel House out of the 2026 class. What's going on?
Well, Coach Fury had a lot to do with those two receiver commitments, and they're also trending for Donovan Murph, another recent reclassification from 2026.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did any of these wide receiver commitments impact Donovan Murph's decision? Because I saw you put another pick in for Murph to South Carolina as well.
No, I feel good about South Carolina there. And look, I think that these guys are reclassifying with the intentions to ultimately end up at South Carolina. Now, we'll see as Murph continues through his process and more games are going to be played and schools will be continuing to make their push. But South Carolina is the front runner there for Murph as well. And look, they want to get more explosive and dynamic on offense. These guys are explosive players that can run and make things happen after the catch and stretch the field and get you going vertical. You got your young quarterback, Lenoris Sellers, to build around, and they want to get some key pieces around him while that window still open. Sellers came into this ball game banged up against Ole Miss, valiant effort, but they just weren't able to cobble together enough consistency to get it done on the field today against an Ole Miss team that really was coming off a tough loss to Kentucky and responded well. Vanderbilt's in victory formation.
Yeah, I was going to say, we got victory formation alert in Nashville right now. The number one team in America is going down.
But Ole Miss rained on the parade of Cocktober and gets themselves on track again here, as they're going to try and make some late charges at the end of this cycle for guys like five-star Caleb Cunningham, the in-state receiver, number one recruit in the state. For Ole Miss to be a place that can flip him to go out and get a win like this on the road and get yourself back on track, get yourself back in the college football playoff contention says a lot. South Carolina, they still need more players. These are big recruiting wins that they got this weekend. They got some really nice offensive line pieces that are young. Obviously, Dylan Stewart, one of the top young players in college football on the defensive side of the ball. Didn't have the results they wanted to on the field, but certainly they were the hottest team on the recruiting trail this week, landed 3 commits, trending for several more.
All right. Yeah. What do you make of, before we get out of the South Carolina segment, what do you make of the Georgia Tech offensive linemen being on campus? Damola Ajitahun and Jimmy Bryson, both targets for South Carolina, both back on campus this weekend.
Yeah, Damola is the coveted target, right? This is his second game of the year, was there for the LSU game. He went with his coach to that, came with his family on this visit. So a lot of interest in South Carolina. He's one of their top remaining targets as they push for a third straight top 20 recruiting class. They got some momentum. Ohio State's in there as well. And then you also have Georgia, of course. But South Carolina is one of the programs giving him a lot to think about.
All right. South Carolina fans, talk to us, comment section below. A big weekend. Didn't go the way you wanted, but at least you got some big commitments. So talk to us, comment section below, how we feeling. All right, Steve, let's talk a little Texas A&M. They beat Mizzou 42-10. There was some prospects on campus there. Talk a little A&M recruiting.
Well, let's just start with Lamont Rogers. He is committed to Missouri right now, but talking to people that spent time with him today, talking to people leading up in this recruitment, I think the Aggies ultimately will flip Lamont Rogers based on the intel right now. We'll see.
And just to be clear to everybody, if the game's at Texas A&M, he's there as an A&M recruit. There is no such thing as visiting on the Missouri sidelines on an away game. So Lamont Rogers was there watching the team he's committed to, but he was in the A&M cheering section. So that's always interesting.
Yeah, no, and this is his second game of the year. He was at the Notre Dame game. Look, Coach Cushing has done a good job. Coach Elko has done a good job in that recruitment. He feels very comfortable. he's very comfortable around the Texas A&M program, loves the trajectory of it. Mizzou did a good job recruiting him, obviously getting him in the fold. But Texas A&M has hung in there. I think they're going to, continue to push for Lamont Rogers, and I like the way that's going. And my on-3 RPMs on Auburn for Nelson McGuire.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ultimately I could be flipping that to Texas A&M too. He's an on 300 in-state recruit that they recently offered, and Texas A&M has a lot of momentum there. He says he'll be back for another game, but had a great time on campus today.
Yeah, that's a big one. Nelson McGuire had been previously trending to Auburn, as you said. So Texas A&M fans, talk to us. Let us know. Comment section below. Big win over Mizzou, 42-10. Big time recruits on campus, and you heard it. Lamont Rogers would be a massive pickup for the Aggies. Let us know how you're feeling. Comment section below. All right, Steve, we're going to wrap this show up with a trip down to the state of Florida, where UF and FSU, they're getting started right now as we speak. Well, let's start with Florida. They got some big-time commits on campus, none bigger than their defensive lineman, the prized commit of this class right now, Jalen Wiggins. He's on campus, the top 10 defensive lineman, along with Joshua Moore, who's being recruited by, well, not just Miami, UCF as well. And UCF is in Gainesville this weekend. Nashawn Montgomery, he's another one that UCF's had some contact with. So how important is this game for Florida? And could UCF, kind of the same way Colorado did, could UCF pick up a little recruiting momentum on the road?
Well, UCF is reeling after last week's tough loss to Colorado. They poured a lot of resources into that game, invited a lot of top recruits to campus, and really they were hardly in that game. Colorado dominated them for 4 quarters. So certainly an opportunity to wipe the taste out of that mouth and go on the road and get a win inside the swamp for Billy Napier and his Florida staff. This is a game that they have to have going into what's going to be a tough back half of their schedule. And this is a game that could help propel them into those ball games as they continue to get better. They continue to fight under Coach Napier and this staff. Everybody loves Coach. They're doing their best. They're trying to pull this thing together, and they get a great chance Saturday night inside the swamp against UCF.
Yep. All right. We will be talking more about that one all week. So Florida fans, comment section below. How are we feeling about this season? How are we feeling about recruiting and keeping this class together despite some struggles? So far, so good. Let us know. Comment section below. All right, Steve, let's head up to Tallahassee. They are right now, Clemson is already putting belt to ass. It's 10-0, but they could be scoring again here in the first quarter. Florida State has 2 official visitors on campus, positions of need, offensive lineman Daniel Pierre-Louis and Mario Nash, who's committed to Mississippi State. Mario Nash, he's been a name that keeps popping up a little bit more and more, not just with FSU, but a lot of teams trying to flip the talented offensive tackle committed to Mississippi State.
Josh, I lost you there. Vanderbilt fans all over the field right now getting
as they should be.
Which young man were you asking me about?
I was asking you about Mario Nash, committed to Mississippi State. Yeah. I just said his name's been popping up more and more across the country in terms of teams that are trying to kick the tires on him. This weekend, he's taken an official visit to Florida State. So, this is kind of their last-ditch effort to make an impression on him. But what do you make of Mario Nash being in Tallahassee this weekend?
I think Florida State's got a good chance at both those offensive linemen that are on campus. Nash, Pierre-Louis, those are guys that I think they have a chance with my on 3 RPMs on FSU for Pierre-Louis. We'll see what happens as the season continues and this weekend continues. But Mario Nash, he was at LSU recently. Are they going to turn it up? What's Mississippi State going to do as they, work to keep him in the fold? But he's definitely got genuine interest in Florida State. This isn't his first time on campus. And, for Florida State, they got a rebound in this game. There's a lot of prospects on campus that could really help them in the future. This coaching staff, Mike Norvell, they're not having the kind of year they want to have. There will be some changes on this coaching staff following the season, especially if it continues to trend this way. But they look to bounce back quickly next year. And then obviously the portal will be huge in that regard. But there's some recruits on campus that could really help them turn it back around quickly. And they got to play better. And show them that this is a place where they can come in and be competitive, because you're only as good as your last ball game. A lot of these kids don't have the mentality that Mike Norvell has had a couple good seasons at Florida State and historically has been a pretty damn good coach. So they got to get it together here against Clemson. I have not seen one play of that game yet. So other than your analysis of that ball game a minute ago, that's all I know.
Well, as you were saying, Florida State needs to play better. Clemson just threw a 25-yard screen pass for a touchdown to go up 17-0. And this is kind of the issue that Florida State's having, right? They've lost commitments from some big time players, edge Javian Hilson, Myron Charles, the defensive lineman, Malik Clark, most recently at wide receiver. So these are all positions of need. So you know, the transfer portal kind of failed Florida State this offseason. As big as they've hit in the transfer portal, it failed them this offseason. And that's why you see them go from undefeated regular season to struggling to win maybe 2 or 3 games this season. So with that being said, one of the massive decommitments that Florida State suffered was from one of the best edges in the country, Javian Hilson. You've been talking to Javian Hilson, and he's told you he's going to make a bunch of visits, but he's back in Tallahassee this weekend. Do you think that FSU and Hilson are still an item, and could the Noles reel him back in? Because as you said, if they're going to get better, they got to recruit better, and Javian Hilson, position in need, one of the best in America.
Well, my on-3 RPM is favoring Texas right now for Javian Hilson, but this has been a fluid recruitment. We've seen Alabama lead. We've seen Florida State lead. We like Texas now. So at any point, there could be a momentum change. I thought UCF was a major challenger for Texas. Maybe they still are, but it's Florida State getting an opportunity here to show Javian Hilson why he's such a huge need. And again, look, he doesn't have to look far to see that Florida State has competed at the highest level. It's just last year. This is just the season. They're just not having the season they want to have this year. But we saw Mike Norvell get it on track, have a couple great seasons, a 13-0 regular season last year. And they'll try and restore that real quickly next year. And Javian Hilson's a guy that could certainly help as an instant impact type for true freshman.
Yeah, kind of crazy that Florida State really, truly never got to capitalize on their 13-0 regular season. This is the class that you would think, and heading into the summer, they were number 3. And as we enter October, they're almost outside the top 20. So they really need to get some wins. I mean, that's really ultimately what's going to turn it around. But like you said, probably going to have to go back to the transfer portal this offseason, because it's going to be a slow go on the recruiting trail. I mean, they're going to definitely get theirs. They got to hold on to guys like a Kevin Wynn, and he's on campus. You got Solomon Thomas on campus, recently committed running back Byron Lewis also on campus. I mean, out of those names, I think defensive lineman Kevin Wynn is probably the one that a lot of teams are coming after right now. Wynn is picking up interest from Texas, from Georgia. I mean, if you're an FSU fan, who do you think you got to keep an eye on here for Wynn?
Georgia, I think, is the biggest threat there.
Okay.
For Kevin Wynn. South Carolina has been a program that he's been high on for a lot of his process as well. They got him back on campus earlier this fall. Florida State's in a battle for a lot of their commits. You know, teams are going to keep swinging at Solomon Thomas as well.
Yeah, they're going to have to. All right, Florida State fans, it's not going well right now as we watch this FSU Clemson game. Maybe they come back. Maybe they make a run. But how are you guys feeling about recruiting right now with Florida State, and how are you feeling about Mike Norvell and the team on the field? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, Steve, I think we've reacted to everything that there is to react to. Kind of a lean weekend in terms of like big matchups, but we did not see Alabama falling to Vandy on the road. I mean, that is true. It's gonna take me a little bit to wrap my head around that one. After watching that game against Georgia, I just didn't see this performance coming.
Oh, it's awesome. They will invite this Vanderbilt football team back every 5 years for a game to celebrate this win for the rest of their lives. They will be out there on the field. They'll be waving to the crowd until none of them are left. This is the biggest win in program history. They should all walk to the front of the line at the bar tonight on Broadway. I saw the students trying to figure out how to get the goalposts out of the ground there, it looked like. So a heck of a win. I talked to on 300 cornerback Justin Hopkins. He said this atmosphere at Vandy right now is crazy. It's electric in here. You can see the energy and the shift going on. It looks like a new Vandy. They almost beat Mizzou last week. They get it done against the number 1 ranked team in the country this week. the Alabama Crimson Tide. They go down on the road. Nick Saban said those were like home games for Alabama, but there were at least a few thousand Vanderbilt fans on the field at the end of the game trying to get those goalposts out. And there were some recruits there. Stephon Shivers, a defensive lineman who decommitted from Georgia earlier today. He's someone that Vanderbilt's picking up some steam with. So we'll see where they capitalize. But now all of a sudden, Clark Lee and his coaching staff, they have some ammunition on the trail to point to something tangible.
And big shout out to Vanderbilt. Big shout out to our former colleague Barton Simmons, who runs the recruiting department over there. And they've been trying to build toward this for years. Today they do it. Just a huge win. We're here located in Nashville, and generally speaking, I have off on Fridays because of the weekend. We're here working on Saturday, so I try to run all my errands and do my things on Friday around town. There was a ton of Alabama shirts walking around Nashville on Friday, getting in town a little bit early, getting out on Broadway and trying to celebrate. But boy, I can tell you they didn't see this one coming. I think it was going to be a blowout. Most fans expected, but Vanderbilt wins it. And Steve, I think I'm going to go meet the Vandy fans out on Broadway if we're done here.
Yeah, go get in the front of the line with the football team at the stage.
I'll tell everybody I know Barton Simmons. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out here on Recruit Reaction. A bit of a thin week in terms of big matchups, but some huge upsets this weekend. Down goes number 1, Alabama. We'll be back next week for a Big Ten brawl out in Eugene. We're going to be recruit reacting to Oregon and Ohio State. But this week, we'll have the Inside Scoop tomorrow. We'll have the Wiltfong Whip Around. We'll have the 5-Star Flex. So you guys make sure you are subscribed. It's an exciting time to be subscribed to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, the On3 Recruits channel. See ya.